Camilla Tominey. Lots to get through tonight. We're going to be discussing immigration. We've had the Tory plan for a migrant cap, although they won't give us a figure on what it should be capped to. We've also got Labour saying that they'll bring down the numbers, but again, they won't set a target. And we've got Reform suggesting that migration should be at net zero. So we'll be discussing all that a little later in the show. We're also going to be discussing, of course, Nigel Farage being milkshaked on the campaign trail in Clacton. Not the first time he's had a drink thrown at him. This was the scene there earlier today as a girl walked up to him, threw a milkshake and then walked away. And we're, of course, going to be discussing tonight's TV debate. And actually, we'll cover all of those subjects and more, I hope, with Chris Philp, who's the policing minister. He's the prospective Tory candidate for Croydon South as well. Chris, lovely to see you this morning. This evening.
Good evening, Camilla.
I'm used to doing the show in the morning. My whole day's been discombobulated by being on screen. Right, let's start, first of all. Farage might not be somebody that you particularly like or admire, but at the same time, he shouldn't be being attacked with a milkshake on the campaign trail, should he?
No, he certainly shouldn't. No one running for elected office should be attacked like that, presumably by some kind of deranged lefty. You know, in the last 9 years that I've been an MP, two of my colleagues, one Labour, one Conservative, have been murdered. So we have to take this seriously. The way we decide things in this country is through reasoned debate, discussion, argument, being questioned by the media. We don't do politics by acts of violence, and throwing a milkshake at someone is one end of a spectrum that has a very, very dark endpoint, and that's why I'm very glad police have made arrests. We should have, zero tolerance for that kind of thing.
It's worrying, isn't it? Because that person got quite close. You all have to be out and about amongst the public. That's the whole point of an election campaign, right? You're shaking hands, you're cuddling the proverbial babies, you're knocking on doors. You are quite exposed.
In many ways,
lucky it was milkshake in that cup is what I'm saying, I suppose, Chris.
That's right. I mean, political candidates do expose themselves to the public, as they should. I mean, the whole point of an election and the whole point of being in public service is to meet people the whole time, talk to people, listen. I always listen to people in Croydon, what they're saying, and then take that, obviously, back to Parliament. And that's why this kind of incident is troubling. I've seen another colleague, Mike Freer from Finchley, had his constituency office burnt down just a few months ago, who then decided to step down. Anymore. That's right.
Can we talk about the Farage factor? I mean, obviously, the commentariat today and indeed the polls seem to reflect this idea that it's going to be apocalyptic for the Conservatives now to have Nigel Farage back in the hot seat for Reform and running for that seat. It is difficult, this, isn't it? I mean, you're being squeezed in the polls as it is. You had that disastrous MRP poll, which suggests you're going to be reduced to 140 seats. That would be worse than in 1906. And yet that poll was conducted before Farage announced his candidacy.
Well, let's start with Nigel Farage. I mean, Nigel Farage, I think, has run for Parliament now 7, 8 times. I've lost track, and has lost on every occasion. He, ran in a similar way to this in 2015, didn't win a single seat when it was UKIP. And I think most pollsters, most commentators would say that Reform are not going to win a single MP in this election.
And yet polling does suggest he's more popular with Conservative voters than Rishi Sunak. That's a massive problem for you, isn't it?
Well, the point I was going to make is that given that Reform are not going to win any MPs, if people are Conservative-minded, like as I am, then if anyone votes for Reform, they are simply risking letting Labour win more and more MPs, giving Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 Downing Street. And we know that Keir Starmer has absolutely no interest whatsoever in controlling immigration. He's got no interest at all in personal liberty or controlling taxation.
Can you make that point on immigration when 2 million people have come into this country in the last Parliament alone under the Conservatives? That was following a manifesto in 2019 which pledged to keep immigration down and take back control of our borders. We all remember that Boris Johnson-esque slogan. What's happened? I mean, this is why you're behind in the polls. It's one of the main reasons, isn't it? You failed to control immigration, both legal and illegal.
Well, firstly, on the numbers, many of those, for example, came from Ukraine. That was a couple of 100,000. Many from Hong Kong, fleeing the Chinese Communist Party, who we welcomed here. Okay. But we do agree that immigration needs to go down a lot lower. And in fact, even before today's announcement, we took action last year to, for example, significantly raise the salary threshold you've got to earn before you can come here. We're saying that if you're coming to study or working on a social care visa, you can't bring spouses spouses or dependents with you. Now, those measures will reduce the number of people eligible to come here by 300,000 a year. That is a huge reduction. And let me finish, Camilla. We're seeing that take effect already, because in the first 3 months of this year, 2024, January, February, March, we saw the number of visa applications down by 25%. So we've taken action already, because immigration does need to be a lot lower.
People will rightly ask themselves, why are you having to undo your own policies? This has happened over the course of the last 14 years. OK, there's a statistic to suggest that in the 25 years leading up to 1997, net migration is around 60, 70,000 a year. It's subsequently, in the next 25 years, gone up to 5.1 million, I think it is. That's a 100-fold increase. We associate that with sort of Tony Blair's era, but the Conservatives have continued it. That's one of the reasons you're being punished. I mean, why do you think, for instance, that Rishi Sunak, with everything that you've been announcing, national service, cap on migrant visas, tax cut in the form of a national insurance reduction, why isn't it cutting through? Why aren't the polls shifting for Rishi Sunak?
Well, let's see. We're 4 weeks away from an election. As I say, on the migration numbers, we've taken decisive action already that's going to reduce it by 300,000. That's happening already. On the boats, we said today, I think if we're re-elected, the first Rwanda flight is now firmly scheduled for the 24th of July. And we know the deterrent effect of sending people somewhere like Rwanda does work. We saw it work in Australia about 10 years with their Operation Sovereign Borders. So there is a clear plan. And I think as this election campaign unfolds, we're right at the beginning of it now. We've got 4 weeks, I think just over 4 weeks to go. We will see movement. I think the debate tonight is going to be important. People will see Keir Starmer has essentially no idea. He's got a blank sheet of paper. He will say whatever he thinks he needs to say to get elected. You saw him on that clip then, claiming to be tough on immigration when, as a left-wing lawyer, he was the one that was insinuating that immigration laws were somehow racist. It was the Labour Party who voted 139 times in the last Parliament against our immigration laws.
Why not put a cap on
voting.
The numbers then? Why not give a target? Because you could have scored a win there against Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who on my show on Sunday refused to put a target on it. And I think people watching and listening to this will say, well, if you don't put a target on it, then you can't control immigration, really. You need you can say to yourself, look, immigration is a good thing, but we've had too much of a good thing. Therefore, we're going to cap the numbers at, say, 200,000. Why don't you put a cap on it and say what that cap is to give the public reassurance that you can control this issue?
Well, some numbers I can give are the measures we've taken already, the higher salary threshold, banning the dependents and spouses for students and for care workers. That's going to reduce the number by 300,000. So that's a firm number that your listeners and your viewers can take to the bank straight away. In terms of the new announcement, the cap, we're going to consult with the Migration Advisory Committee, because we do need higher skilled, I think higher skilled people, it's reasonable to have them come in. So things like, doctors, IT professionals, finance professionals, research scientists, those are the kind of people that I think we should be welcoming. We'll consult with the Migration Council to work out what the right number is. Parliament will vote on it. They'll put a cap on it. That cap will reduce every single year, but we need to go through that exercise to work out what it is. But the number you can take to the bank is the measures we've taken already, we've legislated for, they're in law already, 300,000 reduction, and that is happening already as we speak.
All right, Chris Philp, I'll let you get back to the good people of Croydon South.
I'm off there now to knock on some doors.
All right, good man. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening.